Welcome back to the All Outdoors Photography Podcast, where we share experiences out in the field and educate others through landscapes, wildlife, macro, and more with photographers from around the world.
And in today's solo episode, we're going to be talking about my trip to Alaska, specifically Nome, Alaska, and we'll just get right into it. So this trip, a little background information, it's been planned for a long time. Ever since I pretty much started high school and started photography. I was lucky enough to have my parents say they'd take me on one of these trips for a graduation gift. So, I was looking, a long time ago, trying to find something. And I knew I wanted to go to Alaska. That was kind of at the top of the list. But, I kind of took a different view of things. I wanted to get some of the birds of Alaska. When people think of Alaska, they tend to think of the moose and the bear, and those are great. And, it's on my list at some point. But it was really the exotic birds, and, the scenery and everything that I was looking for. So I found this Nome one in September. Kind of booked it pretty quickly. It was through Joseph Van O's Photo Safaris. Really good company. Highly recommend them. And Nome it seemed like one of the bird hotspots in America, honestly, and it definitely was. So this took place a month ago. It was quite the logistics to get there. 4 flights, which is a lot.
Wow.
2 of those flights being 5 hours plus. So the first day it was 3 flights in one day, all the way to Anchorage from Louisville, Kentucky. We spent the night in Anchorage. Anchorage is a pretty big city, actually, surprisingly for Alaska, but it's still beautiful. So literally, we stayed at a hotel by the airport, and then it was about a 5-minute walk, and we went to this amazing seaplane airport. It was I don't know if you've ever seen a seaplane take off, Ryan, but it is so cool.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I think I have an idea of it, but I bet with that Alaska backdrop was pretty cool.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was awesome. Good way to start it off. And in that lake alone, that airport, seaplane airport, there were redneck grebes and red-throated loons and all kinds of stuff that already lifers, and even the magpies were cool to me. On the tour I got a little bit of hate for wanting to photograph magpies, but I was like, hey, I don't get them where I live. So
Are magpies pretty common there?
oh my God, they're like robins. Yeah.
Oh,
And
seriously?
their tails are huge. I actually never got a photo of a magpie. Fun fact, somehow. But really cool to see there.
Yeah.
And still in that first night in Anchorage, I found a bog, literally 5 minutes from the airport as well. A lot of mosquitoes, but a juvenile bald eagle landed right in front of me, literally. It started on a branch, and then it flew down to the water's edge. And this is the closest I've ever gotten to an eagle. So that was like, wow, this is Alaska. It's kind of that thing that set off the trip. It was really cool, for sure.
That's awesome. So all that occurred in the first day or so?
About in a span of 2 hours. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Was
Okay.
And I was exhausted, so I didn't want to do any hikes or anything in Anchorage. I didn't really want to explore Anchorage. I just wanted to stay by my hotel, and still all of that happened. Because 4 flights and a time change, it's a 4-hour time difference, so it takes a lot out of you, for sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine with that too. But yeah, that's really cool. You got almost easy access to these cool birds and stuff that you saw pretty readily available. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it's just the parks are so beautiful. It looks like a remote kind of large park in our side of the country, and that's an urban park for them. So just super cool to see, for sure.
Yeah. How much of Alaska is truly wilderness area?
It's most of it.
Really?
I don't know the percentage, but if you put Alaska in the United States, it takes up like 10 states. It's that big. And you've got all the different habitats. You've got the rainforest, or nuts. Well, I guess it is. Some of it's a rainforest, some of it's a boreal forest. You've got the tundra, which we'll get into a lot. And you've got the true Arctic, just all kinds of so many different environments. It's truly the last wild place in America. Even the towns, are very wild. So, even Anchorage, you drive 20 minutes outside of Anchorage, you're at a glacier, or you're at a beautiful like mudflat beach that spans for like 10 miles. So it's amazing for sure. You could definitely do a whole photography trip out of Anchorage. And I think next time I go to Alaska, I might consider doing that. You just stay at a hotel in Anchorage, and you got all this stuff around you too. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, so is the company you mentioned that you booked it through, are they about photography? Are they about like birding specifically? Like what are they about?
So I think they do some birding, but this is definitely a photography centric tour. And it's marketed as birds and muskox, so we focused on both. Definitely a little more heavily on birds because our guide, great guide, his name is Eric Rock. He took our opinions and about what we wanted to see. And muskox are a little bit easier to find, obviously. I mean, they're like 100 times bigger than birds. And we'll get into those, but it was kind of both of those, which was great. And that attracted some serious birders and also people that were really interested in the muskox, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's great. Yeah, and I think they do birding specific tours too, and landscape, all kinds of stuff. It's actually the oldest photography tour company ever. It's like the first one, so they know how to do them for sure.
They're established and experienced. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really
sure.
cool. That's interesting though how it's like birds and then it's like this completely different animal too. Are muskox like really really common?
Yeah. So I mean, muskox are everywhere in Nome. But before I get to that, I do want to tell you a little bit about the town of Nome because it is crazy how small it is, and how not weird, but how different it is than even Anchorage. So the flight there surprisingly was on a normal sized plane, like your 737. And then you land at the airport. The airport's literally every couple hours they have to clear muskox off of the runway. Because there's no fences. It's just an open runway. You land there. There's no gate. You just get out, and then they put you in a garage, and then the garage is basically the airport. I mean, it is the tiniest airport you've ever seen. Probably 7-foot ceilings, which, if you've been to an airport, I mean, they're normally 40-foot ceilings. So it was really crazy. And as you get there, you drive through the town, it looks like an apocalypse, literally. So Nome is not accessible by road. So you have to get there by boat or plane. And only plane in the winter, of course, because it's frozen over. So people are living in shipping crates. There's houses jumbled out of different materials. There's no houses that are just one consistent material. Which is really weird, but it's really cool. Even the mining boats aren't actual boats. They're a combination of tires and oil barrels, and it is so weird. But it's really cool.
How much of this did you know ahead of time before you went to know?
I knew how small Nome was. I didn't know what it would look like. But I mean, our hotel looked like that on the outside, but on the inside it was very modern, very clean. So they know how to do good insides. It's just they have a lack of materials. I mean, it's not like they're primitive people or anything. I don't want to make it sound like that. They're just normal people, but they just don't have the supplies to build normal houses. And yeah, it's really is a great town, and we ate at a lot of restaurants there throughout the week. Probably rotated between 6. We did lunch and dinner every day, and all the restaurants had plenty of food. Really good food too. It was still very modern. Even recently, they got a public Wi-Fi for the whole town, which is good because I could stay fairly connected when I was in town. I wasn't sure about that. And yeah, the town is very, very small, 3,000 people. I'd say there's probably 1,000 in town, and then there's some spread out over the tundra and along the coast for fishing purposes. But But yeah, that's basically the town of Nome. So
That's really interesting though. I mean, circling back to you saying about like their houses and everything, like are they just kind of like scavengers in a way? Is it just kind of like whatever raw materials they have around that they just build these shelters out of?
yeah, I mean they're not even necessarily scavenging. I mean a lot of there's building companies there that build. They just don't have the supplies. So they'll the building companies will build out these supplies. Like the houses are winterproof. I mean they're besides the fishing shanties for the people who come just for the summer, the actual houses are built for the winter. They're, elevated up above the permafrost and everything. They're just, kind of cobbled together, which is really, really cool to see.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like communes, especially with that like size of the town itself. I bet everyone kind of like knows each other in a way too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, they will definitely tell if you're not from Nome. I mean, if they don't know your name, they know you're
Yeah,
a tourist.
first name
But very,
basis.
very friendly. Because I mean, the Nome economy is built around mining, fishing, and photography. And also the dog sled race, the famous Iditarod, ends in Nome in the winter. But that's the main things. So they welcome the birders. They give out advice. Make sure there's a table large enough for your group and everything. So very accommodating for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, that's neat.
Probably the friendliest people I've ever met. Probably I mean, they're just so down to earth and.
Yeah, willing to share their knowledge about the local wildlife and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say about the muskox. So, for the birds, you have to travel out far. I mean, we would drive 50 to 100 miles a day. I'll talk about the three roads, but for the birds, you got to go far to find the rarities. But for the muskox, they love town, and even the guide didn't know. We couldn't figure out the reason why they stayed so close to town. They're not hunted, so they're not scared of humans. Um, but they don't eat any human foods, so that they just feed on the willows. But for some reason they love sticking around town. So muskox they weren't easy, because they'll run away, even if you like get out of your van in some scenarios. But it's kind of the thing we could do at the beginning of a shoot or the end of the shoot, and we wouldn't have to spend hours on them, which is nice because they're beautiful animals, but you can only take so many shots of a muskox. Like, it's good to have them, kind of more accessible. That was kind of your easy species to get, which is crazy because in like Norway, where they also have them, I think it's Norway, I'm pretty sure. You'll have to like, hike hundreds of miles into the wilderness. So if you're looking for muskox photography, this is the place to do it. And the natives love them and everything. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, how long did it take you to get, let's say, like, bored of like even photographing them, or were you like experimenting with different compositions or lighting or stuff like that?
well, so I never got bored per se.
Okay.
Actually it was pretty cool. Every scenario we shot a muskox in was different. The first day, it was very distant, very far off. So that was kind of cool. And then that same night, we got them on top of a gravel pit, fairly close. The calves were out, had just been born, so that was cool. And yeah, that was a good scenario, and many other scenarios. But the best scenario was on the very last day. Oh my God! I mean, it was insane. They were right close to us. We stayed on the road. You don't chase after muskox. They're not dangerous per se, but they get disturbed very easily. So we stayed on the road, and they literally came right up to us. I mean, we got full frame shots with like golden light hitting their eyes. And at that point, I was like, my muskox portfolio is complete. And we moved a little bit and even got backlit. So I got like the fur of the muskox illuminated by the golden hour sun. And it was just insane. So that the muskox part of the tour was definitely fulfilled. And I'll get into the birds too, but it's just really cool to see these animals that you can see nowhere else in the U.S.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Just the cool lighting opportunities and how it kind of like came full circle, even though you saw them quite a bit. It's like that last
Mhm.
day's getting like the portfolio shots of them too.
Yep. And I need to talk about the lighting too. I forgot to mention. It is golden hour in Nome for 8 hours a day. So it is insane. Actually, I'd probably even say more than 8 hours. It's probably 10 hours a day. Um, so talking about our schedule, we would get up about we'd leave about 6 a.m. Because although the sun rises around 4:30, 5 a.m., there's huge mountains. So the mountains will block the sunrise for a while. And I was disappointed at that when I heard about that at first, but then I realized it's just always golden hour. So we had no clouds all week, and that was actually perfect. You can shoot at both 6 a.m. in golden light, and you can also shoot at about 10:30 and almost the same quality of golden light. I mean, my ISO did not go over 800, and I know that sounds crazy to say, but even with high shutter speeds, it did not go over 800. I mean, it was amazing, amazing.
I mean, I imagine it's you get kind of like spoiled by that kind of thing too. I mean,
Oh yeah.
where we're from, it's like you're lucky to get the golden hour and maybe like a little bit and then some, in between that as a buffer. But like, yeah, that's just, huh, I couldn't even imagine that.
Oh, I mean, it was just it was so cool, and it just allowed you to not, besides the mountains, there were no clouds, which is just very lucky. So you don't have to worry about losing the light. You can spend your time with the subject, really work on it. Because in like morning shoots where we live, there's a element of desperation. If you don't find that subject, right as the light is rising, especially in the summer, you're kind of screwed. Like you really got to be quick. But in Gnome, it really allowed you to slow down.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious though. How does like that sort of, I guess, with the lighting and everything and the times of day, how does that like affect the wildlife? Like, are like crepuscular like species, are they more active like throughout the day just because it is 8 or 10 hours, or like how does that like affect like the birds and mammals?
That's the interesting thing. With the birds, they're active kind of in the same cycle that they are here in the morning and evening time. Um, Obviously with the time change, but anyway, they're basically on that, really active early in the morning and late in the evening. Except for a few exceptions. And I can once I get into some of the specific species, I can go into that. Um, but for most birds, it was the morning and evening. And then the muskox, they would definitely active. I think really the most in the evening and the early morning. So like my portfolio muskox shots that I was talking about, that was like, let's see what time. It was 5:30 a.m. So that was really early. Some light had just kind of hit because there was an obstruction because it was in town. Um, and during the day they'll sleep and they'll move around a little bit, but you can definitely tell they're slower and everything.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
how big were like those, I don't know what you call them, like herds or the groups of those muskox in particular?
So I never saw less than about 15.
Wow.
Normally it was like 20 to 30. So that it was really cool.
That must have been something surreal to see, but I bet they're probably like pretty habituated people if they came up close to you.
They are not habituated to people. I would
Really?
not say that. No. The they came close to us that last time only because we were kind of using the van as a blind, kind of peeking
Right.
around,
Right.
and staying on the road. But normally, we would try to sometimes walk down a trail, and they would be 100 feet away, or probably no, 200 feet away, and they would run away. They're pretty darn scared of people, so that you have to work for the shots, and it took us a whole week to really get the amazing muskox shots. Like it's hard to get that close for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's understandable then. Yeah.
Yeah, but it made it feel more worthwhile, so it was good.
Yeah.
Um,
Give chase to
yeah,
them in such a way, not literally,
yeah.
but yeah. So maybe tell us more about the birds because I know that's probably the biggest draw for you going to Alaska here.
Yeah, so I'll just go through the species that were my highlights.
Yeah.
Redneck phalaropes. Oh my gosh, so cute. they're literally the size of a rubber ducky. Those tiny little ones, uh, which is just amazing. Um, we got first night a good opportunity with them. It's super cool.
Good
This
bird.
was taken at 4 p.m. and it was golden hour. Well, not golden hour. It was golden light, which is crazy. Um, so that was awesome. Um, that same day we saw the rarest bird I saw. I got a not so good photograph of it, more of a documentary shot. And we weren't sure we would see this. This is a yellow wagtail from Asia. Very rare bird, like extremely rare. Um, Definitely something to have on your life list for sure. Um, so that was cool. Um,
So
yeah, and there,
striking plumage. Like, what makes it rare in particular? I mean, is it threatened or anything in that state?
it is only ever spotted in Nome in North America, and it's not spotted every. I think it is spotted every year, but it's not spotted every like it's spotted like every 3 weeks or something. Um,
Interesting. So like, what's known like the main draw for it? Like, what habitat is it like attracted to?
I totally forgot to mention that, but Nome is a tundra.
Oh, okay.
The tundra is literally the most amazing environment I've ever experienced. Um, it's the softest mosses and the most beautiful tundra flowers, amazing rocks, and it's surrounded by beautiful mountains with willows. And the willows only get about 10 feet max, so you can imagine how good that is for bird photography because they'll be nice and low. And all these birds, come here to breed. Um, Shorebirds, especially, love to breed on the mountaintops, which, man, that's an experience seeing a shorebird on a mountain. And then the smaller birds will, go in the willows. So, yeah, this yellow wagtail really enjoyed the willows here. And then amongst the tundra, there's the Tundra Ponds, which are amazing. They're red-throated loons, which were very skittish. But if you took your time, laid down, we even put up a little blind, they would come close. Definitely more skittish with common loons than common loons. I've done a lot with common loons, but very striking birds, very creepy actually. Their calls, but really cool to photograph, and much bigger than a common loon too. Yeah.
So like, how many of these birds you mentioned so far, and hereafter, like, how many of them were you seeking out in particular versus like ones you kind of like had to identify or something like as you saw them?
So our guide was with us pretty much the whole time. The yellow wagtail was spontaneous, but the rest of them we kind of requested them. So far that I mentioned, we kind of came across the yellow wagtail while we were shooting the loons. Uh, but yeah, it was really cool. Western sandpipers were everywhere. You saw flocks of them, and they were in breeding plumage, which was very beautiful. Um, One of the roads, which is, let's see, Safety Sound, is like the road, or no, it's called Safety Harbor Road, and it goes around along the Safety Sound. Uh, it reminded me of kind of like Metzger Marsh in McGee, at McGee Marsh, kind of like a wildlife, waterfowl refuge. There were thousands of tundra swans, common eiders, which are really cool to see. We got some tundra swans taking off, and that's along the ocean. So there's the sound on the left, the ocean on the right. So we photographed, Arctic terns on the ocean. So that was really cool. And it's just a beautiful place. I even saw a dead walrus, which I've never seen a walrus, but seeing a dead one was really cool.
That's one way to see it. Yeah.
Uh, we were hoping a bear would come on its carcass, but unfortunately we did not see a bear. Uh, but that always attracts stuff like that. So we did keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
There was another road. It was called Teller Road. Teller was just kind of your traditional tundra, a little less mountainous than the other road I'll talk about. Along there, you had a bunch of thrushes, so this like a northern water thrush. Beautiful mountain views. The mountains are just stunning. The landscape opportunities are unparalleled too. Uh, I believe it's the Sawtooth Mountain Range, and then you combine that with the reds, the red, can't speak, the reds and the greens and the yellows of the tundra, because it is spring, not summer. You get some really good landscapes. And if you go up, there are off the main roads. There are a couple of mountain roads. At the top of these mountains are breeding birds. So you got these like semi-palmated plovers, which are just stunning. I mean, really pretty birds, really pretty. I mean, I've worked with piping plovers, but semi-palmated are, like, in my opinion, like my favorite kind of plover for sure. Um, Western sandpipers were even up on mountains. I got one shot in particular where there's like a mountain with snow behind it, and I'm really happy with that. And kind of the rust color, bringing plumage of the westerns. Um, and kind of just along the way too, just experimenting with some macro stuff. Capturing the tundra flowers with a wide angle. Just really getting low. Uh, the American golden plover was in breeding plumage. I got a really cool shot with like the colorful purple flowers of a mountaintop with the golden plover in those flowers. Um, it's really cool to see shorebirds on top of mountains. You don't see that anywhere else.
What was I guess attracting them to like being on top of the mountain? Was it just kind of why not? I mean, like, is there a reason why it was up there?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's kind of a misconception out there about breeding of shorebirds. People think they do it on beaches. Some do, like I know piping plovers do, but the migrating shorebirds that will, travel way up to Alaska and the Arctic and whatnot, they like the higher elevation. They'll land up there because it's easier to see. It's safer up there. There's less likely to be a grizzly up there or a fox, especially. Foxes will definitely go after shorebirds or a wolf up there. So they like the higher elevations.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm. But it is something cool to see. I even saw a snipe on a tree, which is really cool. I had never seen a shorebird on a tree. Um, and let's see, I also saw a Louisiana water thrush up there,
Good bird.
which is pretty crazy. Um, Now the main thrush and my target bird for the trip was the blue throat. Oh my God, the blue throat is just insane. The blue throat migrates from Russia. It only comes to Nome in North America. It's also in some parts of Europe. Um, the blue throat was a challenge. That was the bird I was talking about that's active later in the day. So it didn't become active until about 10 o'clock a.m., 10 a.m. And this is where having a guide really came into play. So by having a guide, he knew the blue throat spot. So we go to the blue throat spot. You set up. You have to wade into a willow forest, so the willows are above you, and you just have to hide in the willows. Find an area near water, listen for the blue throat call, and just hope it comes in. And we waited for hours, and it was worth it. We had three different distinct opportunities. First one, I was the only person that got a blue throat photo because I had a window between bushes, so I was pretty lucky there. Um, and we did eventually come back, got much closer to the blue throat. With the beautiful willows, it was still pretty far away, so I was using my teleconverter and the crop mode of my camera. So that gives me about 1200 millimeters, but that allowed me to get like a good portfolio shot that I'm happy with the blue throat. And once again, I mean, Nome is not, you don't just go to Nome and get all these birds. You can see them all, but you don't get amazing photos. You have to put in the effort. I mean, you wait for hours, you hide, sometimes uncomfortably. You have to hide in ditches or, build your own blind and wait. But it's worth it because the photos are unique to you and your group, and it's really remote. So.
Yeah, that's really really cool. I mean, you really turned me on to this blue throat bird. I never had seen one before, like in person or a photo, and like I'm just such a fan of it. I'm like I have to see this one in person someday. This is a really cool
Yeah,
bird.
it's got to be one of my favorite birds now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
And
how?
their in-flight display. Oh my God, their flight display is amazing. They just fly up way up in the air, so they'll fly right over you, and then they'll dive down. I mean, there'd be times where we're waiting, for a perch in front of us. We've kind of scouted out a perch that we'd like for the blue throat, and they'll land right behind us. My friend Mike from the workshop, one landed basically on his head, like right next to it. Didn't touch his head, but was basically right there. And they'll tease you, but eventually they'll give you a shot.
That's really cool. Yeah. This is a little bit of a tangent of a question, but like, how big was your group, and like, what was like the demographic? Like, were there a lot of like older people? Like, how was the skill level of photography? Like, what was all that like?
So it was interesting. It was a 8-person group, including the guide. Everybody there was over the age of 40, except for me. I expected that. That's the deal with all workshops. No matter who you do it with, no matter what, it's mostly older people. But I really enjoyed it. I'd say probably 3 of them were very serious photographers like me. We'd always get low. Despite their age, they'd still get eye level everything, put in the effort. And there was others that like to do more stand up shooting and whatnot. But everybody definitely had an interest in birds and wildlife. And it was a great group overall. It's good. It's good to talk to older people. You learn a lot. I genuinely made some great friends. I met a friend. He lives in Boise. I'm definitely going to visit him there at some point, just because he was a great photographer and a great friend along the trip. So.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, like when you spend that much time with like the same group of people, it's like no doubt you're gonna make connections that way too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. So at the end of one of the roads, Cougar Rock Road, which is a little bit more mountainous, there was this probably the best landscape opportunities of the week. It was called Frozen Salmon Lake. It was still partially frozen. I even got a shot with moose tracks in the foreground, and this beautiful, beautiful landscape with this lake and this wrapped around glacier, and it really kind of turned me back on the landscapes again, which I haven't shot a lot in the past year, so it was good to kind of get back into that, and it was just stunning, kind of getting some sunstar stuff, just amazing, amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, you mentioned about like with this trip, your intentions were really on birds, but I mean, like, how was it switching it up and doing landscapes for a little bit?
Oh, I mean, it was awesome, awesome. I mean, it was so photogenic. Um, but I even slowed down, because we had a van to travel around in, and I could bring my tripod everywhere. So just grab the tripod from the car. I'd have a wide angle in the bag. Didn't use it often, but when I did, I could just snap it on. Got some amazing landscapes. There's even some old houses out in the middle of the tundra that I kind of included in the landscape. So stuff like that was really fun to play with too.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, kind of breaks up the variety a little bit too, but I can't you can't go wrong with just like Alaska and scenery. I think too.
Yeah. Another highlight was the red poles, common red poles. Really charismatic birds. Once they land in your area, they'll stick around for like 20 minutes. So I think I took like 1,000 red pole shots in just one scenario. And they're just stunning. And we got, there's a variation with pretty much every individual you'll see. And the guy that was really friendly with us was like red and pink and just stunning. And he came super close. And we all really got some great shots. Kind of including the willows, which are great perches. And some of them kind of the blue mountains in the backgrounds. So it was really cool, for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, what was bringing that particular bird in close? Was it like a food source or something?
I'm not totally sure. I mean, we heard him in the area and we saw him flying around, so you basically just have to kind of wait and watch at that point.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's still a good bird, of course. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Wildlife-wise, I saw my first fox. I got a photo I'm pretty happy with. On top of a mountain was kind of some brambly trees. It was super cool to see that fox. He wasn't really scared of us. He just kind of slowly made his way up the mountain and kind of looked back at us and opened his mouth and got some great photo opportunities. And once again, it's my first time to see a fox, so that was pretty darn cool.
Mhm.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, just making sure. I thought I cut off.
No, you're good. Sorry.
Okay. um, then that same day, we saw the fox. Got really close to long-tailed ducks, which those are cool and pretty rare ducks. Got the male and female landing in a tiny tundra pond. Weren't scared of us whatsoever, um, and it was super close. Was even able to include some mountains, zooming out to 100 millimeters. Got some video. I got a video of them taking off at 120p. That was super cool. Probably my favorite waterfowl moment from the trip. Definitely.
That's really cool. Yeah. How many of like these bird species are migratory? I mean, you mentioned the blue throat coming from like Russia in particular, but like how many of these are like year-round residents there in Alaska?
The only year-round resident I can think of is the ptarmigan, and that's it. Because the
Really?
rest of them, yeah, because they can't survive. Uh,
Right. Okay.
some are migratory, some are breeding, for the summer. Uh, but most of them can't survive in the harsh conditions.
Interesting.
Yep. Um, Now, one day, our tire broke down 100 miles from town. That was pretty scary for a bit. Because if nobody came, I mean, we'd have to spend the night out there. And we were by a patch of willows, which that's where the bears live. They live in the willows. And we even saw bear scat. Um, so our tire did break down. So we just, decided to make the most of it. We had the most beautiful dinner I've ever had. Um, we There's a Subway in town, believe it or not. So we picked up Subway, had a picnic, and we all just ate on the side of a mountain, kind of looking out at Nome. Like I said, best dinner I've ever had. Um, we had a lot of free time. Eventually, people did come, but as I was waiting, I did some more macro work. Just the most stunning flowers you'll ever see. Really tiny, and you can really do some cool stuff with background separation and everything. Um, and also worked with a golden crown sparrow. Hadn't photographed this bird ever. They're bigger than most sparrows, which is pretty cool. So I really enjoyed that. Kind of made you know, kind of made a bad situation into a good one. So
Yeah, it's like I guess if there's like some silver lining to it, you're just like you're taking a bad situation and doing some good with it. So taking your mind off of it a little bit. So did you happen to get? I mean, you're here now, but like how was the outcome of that particular incident?
yeah, we had a person. There's always people in the summer driving back and forth. So about an hour and a half later, we had a person come by and be gracious enough to. It was our wrench. We didn't have the right size wrench, so he let us use his wrench. And just the most friendly people, and we just we turned around and we still shot on the way back, but yeah, we got a new tire the next day and it was all good. So
That's good. Yeah.
yep. On the way back, we got we saw a bunch of willow ptarmigan all week, which are kind of like the size of a chicken, and they're the Alaskan state bird, and they are so skittish. Definitely the most skittish subjects I've worked with, in Alaska at least. So I was able to get one sequence where I literally crawled on my stomach for 30 minutes to get close to this bird, with two other photographers, and it worked out. We got like full frame portraits. I got one shot where it's like him on a willow and like the blank sky above. And it was crazy. I mean, it was so much effort, but it was so worth it. Yeah, such cool birds too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's just cool hearing your dedication to it with just kind of sitting there or standing or just trying to be as still as possible, just so you can get these best shots of these birds too.
hmm Yeah, I mean, and there's a reason that Nome is for serious photographers. Like biggest week, it was easier to get photos. You basically go to the boardwalk, and if you have a good amount of skill, and a good enough autofocus system, you'll get shots. Here you're gonna have to work for it and have a guide that knows the locations for sure.
Right. Yeah. Do you? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but like, do you think you could do this kind of trip without a guide? Like, how successful would you be?
Now I can. So, I took pictures of all the locations of interest and, took notes and everything. And, he encouraged us to do that, because that's, part of what you're paying for.
Right.
Um, you definitely need a guide the first time, though, or go with a buddy who may not be a guide but has experience. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, it definitely
And
helps.
costs really aren't, like, if you're staying by yourself and Nome, costs really aren't horrible for photography. You just have to reserve things about a year in advance.
Be committed early on. Yeah. But
Yeah.
but I mean, it makes sense. I bet it's pretty touristy kind of area. I mean, Alaska in general, probably.
Not Nome. There were barely any tourists. The only tourists there were other birders.
Really?
There
Okay.
was barely anybody. I mean, there was one other birding group there. Actually, Ben Newt was in that group. A pretty famous photographer. I got to meet him. He was leading a group. And there was one other group, Matthew Studebaker. I don't know if you've heard of him, but I had heard of him online before. Uh, so yeah, it's pretty small.
Hmm.
So I mean, there were never other groups shooting with us ever. So
Right. There was no like overlap per se with the groups.
no,
You guys
because
are.
you're going 50 to 100, even 150 miles into the wilderness, you won't see anybody else.
Yeah.
You won't
Yeah.
hear any planes. You won't hear any cars. You'll only smell the fresh mountain air. So it's amazing.
That is so
Yeah.
cool. Did you guys ever like camp at all, or is it just kind of like lodging in hotels?
No, to be honest, I wasn't comfortable camping in the tundra, and it was nice to have a hotel. Get 4 hours of sleep at night, generally 3 to 4 hours, and then get 1 to 2 midday in between shooting. We do a morning and an evening shoot, so
Right. Take advantage of all that golden hour light, of course.
for sure, for sure, we'd shoot 8 to 9 to 10 hours each shoot, so it was pretty intense.
But I mean, that's the way to do it, especially if you drop yourself in a location like that. Especially if like your first time, it's kind of like you want to get familiar with it, immerse yourself into it, and maximize your shooting time, of course, too.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's definitely the ideal schedule for me, for sure. Um, yeah, I mean another amazing bird was the Arctic warbler. Very rare bird. Very cool to see. Got some really good looks at that. Um, they were challenging in some locations, but one we went to, they came right up. So we weren't complaining, and got really good shots of that. And the blue throat came back. It was in the blue throat spot and got pretty good, like small and frame blue throat stuff. And worked with that for a while. Um, and then after that shoot, we saw a female moose. So kind of a cherry on top there.
On the bird cake.
Uh-huh.
Weirdest
Yes.
analogy, but you get the point. Yeah,
Uh,
that's really cool.
uh,
Yeah, you
yeah.
got a variety of different mammals throughout the trip. Besides the birds, of course, too,
Just musk oxen moose.
and the fox.
Yeah, and fox. Yeah, sorry. Yep.
Can't forget
Um,
that. Yeah,
yeah. Also, there's snipes everywhere, so that was fun. We even did some snipe stuff in town, which was awesome.
that's cool. Yeah,
Savannah Sparrows, really cool, and I don't know, their colors seem to pop more in Nome. I may be crazy, but I really think they are more colorful there. More colorful there. Excuse me. Um,
yeah,
yeah, beautiful sparrows, beautiful.
yeah. They're a nice grassland one. We get them around here. I don't think I've ever actually seen one though. But yeah, to know like how I guess colorful their plumage is at least.
Mm. Lapwing lawn spurs were
Mm.
pretty common, especially out on that beach road. Um, we got a pretty good shot of that. I got a frontlit and a backlit in the same scene. I'm really happy with that. Um, yeah, so those are cool for sure. Let's see what else here. Yeah, for long-tailed Yeagers, pretty everywhere. I even had one land on Alaska sign. I think that'll probably be like the promo image for this episode, honestly. Alaska with a long-tailed Jaeger on it.
Right.
Uh, but it's kind of like a quintessential Alaska shot. We saw Aleutian terns, which are very rare. Normally are only in the Aleutian Islands. And we caught them in breeding display. This was at a tern colony on the last day, so we worked with Arctics too, just flying around. And that is so cool to just work with a tern colony that close. That's really an experience like no other.
Mhm. Man, that's just awesome. Just the variety of birds you're seeing too, and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just the opportunities and just the knowledge you gain from just even just this one trip. Just everything you just learn, and you take it with you, and you take it back to all your other shooting you do elsewhere. But also, if you go back here, or when you do, that's just really cool.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely go back in the next. I'd like to go back in the next 5 years at some point,
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Is
Yeah, so we ended off. I got one more bird here. We ended off the trip with a northern weed eater on the final morning,
cool.
kind of like a shrike. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, how like overall like how was the trip? What would you guess? Not really give it a rating, but like what was your favorite parts? Maybe your favorite birds. Maybe things you would like. Maybe learning lessons and things you'd like. I don't know. Change if you went back.
So my favorite bird was the blue throat, just because of the colors, and the probably the ptarmigan.
Hmm.
Um, if I changed anything, I would bring a floating blind. Now that I'm into floating blinds, I saw the potential of those tundra ponds. I would bet, based on my experiences in Michigan, that you could get right up to all these waterfowl in the floating blind. Um, that was probably my only, not complaint, just the only thing with the trip. It's hard to get close to waterfowl no matter what state you're in. You'd see pintails and, they'd fly away instantly. And the loons are pretty skittish. So I think a floating blind would remedy that, or even waders. Um, but besides that, I was happy with everything I got. Amazing trip. Just a beautiful environment. Um, I would say definitely be a birder, yeah, definitely be a birder to go, because the muskox aren't going to entertain you for a week. You got to
Right.
have that birding eye too, or a landscape photographer. If you're into landscapes, you could do some great stuff here. Uh, but yeah, definitely be one of those. Uh, Even if you're just a binocular guy or a spotting scope person, you can go out to these areas and scope out the different types of turns. Our guide had a scope, and we actually got a record for Nome that had never been seen before. Um,
Hmm.
it was a red-faced cormorant, uh, never been seen before. Or no, sorry, it was not red-faced. It was a pelagic cormorant, never had been seen before in Nome. I e-birded it, and I got a bunch of angry emails. But it turns out Ben Newt himself saw the same thing a day later. So it got confirmed, and he was able to get a photo. I was not, but so that was pretty cool. We got the
Wow.
freaking record. So that was a highlight for sure too.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. You basically
Hmm.
made history, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah. Why
basically.
why are people angry? Because like they didn't get to see it, or like were they thinking
They
you were
didn't
wrong?
believe me. It never really
Uh,
mattered.
okay.
Yeah. Uh,
That's a bummer. Especially it's tough though. It's a tough sell if you don't get a photo of it or audio. Like and you
uh,
you put that sighting out on eBird, you'd be like, what? No, it's
yeah,
impossible.
I mean, it is a serious birder place, so you'll run into some serious people, and yeah, it's a good thing most of the time too. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
reason why it's so conserved, and you're not going to find any birding help in town unless you find a guide, because the locals know about the muskox, but they don't. I mean, they've never seen the blue throat or anything. Just because you have to hike and then wait for the blue throat. I mean, you'll never see it unless you have binoculars. I mean,
Right.
so
Me-
stuff like that you really need a guide for.
Yeah.
At
How,
least.
how many miles were you hiking overall, like per day or something?
Oh, so the trip was not really marketed at hiking. They, maybe 2 miles most. It's pretty
Okay.
easy. When I
Yeah.
say hiking, it was more just going slightly off road and kind of moving through the willows.
Right. That's yeah pretty manageable. I think for most people that would sign up for like a trip like this, of course.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. It was nice, not to, because if you hike, you can't guarantee, you know, if the location's close to the road, that's for the best. Because in these willows, there are bears. They love living in the willows. There's moose that will trample you. So you really want to stay as close to the road as possible. And there's, sinkholes, Tundra Ponds you could fall into. So it's close to the road as possible. And with a train, I would only go off road with a experienced person. Bring a walking stick or something. Kind of stick ahead of you. Make sure you're not going to sink in, because there is some boggy areas, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, how often were you shooting from just the vehicle?
I was, being a young person, I was in the very back most of the time. So I would not be able to really take vehicle shots because there was no back window that could roll down. I could look out. I couldn't roll it down. But we would just all kind of sprint out of the van. I would pop out the back. Everybody else would go out the main doors.
You covered the rear.
It worked pretty well. I never missed anything because of that.
Right, yeah. I bet that stuff, the group politics, you kind of settle at the beginning of the trip. All right, Henry, you get the rear.
I did get to the front a couple times, but...
Okay. Yeah, that's good. You get to see the sightings first sometimes, at least that way.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. No, but the back had, really good windows, so just driving and watching. I mean, I didn't bring my phone on these trips, on the tours, which was nice. So I wouldn't have my phone for 10 hours. And it was so nice. I wouldn't even have a book or anything, because just looking at the tundra is
oh yeah,
better than any TV show I've ever watched. I'm serious. I was so entertained. I never napped in the car or anything. I just watched.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine that too. It's just you're just running pure adrenaline and excitement, and there's no dull moment. There's always something to see out there too.
And the guide would have his locations, but also he'd have us look constantly, we found a second blue throat spot just because one of the tour participants spotted it. It saw it doing its display from the road. So we found that new spot, and it actually ended up being even better. So stuff like that, we're constantly watching, and it worked out very well.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of to wrap it up here, it was an amazing trip. I'd highly recommend it. I'm going to be getting these gnome photos out soon if you guys want to see it. And, of course, there'll be a slideshow on here. I'll try to do my favorites on the slideshow, get some muskox, get some landscapes, and, of course, get some of the birds. Yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching the All Outdoors Photography Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the video version on YouTube as well. You can subscribe down below, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.